Italy. This is the same marble that Michelangelo's David is carved out of. It's stunning, it's beautiful, it's absolutely gorgeous and elegant. However, Italy has a very different climate than Chicago does. So after about 15 winters in Chicago, that building started to crack on the outside. They were like, oh no, this is going to be a liability. So they spent an additional $80 million on top of the $120 million that they had originally constructed it with. They spent an additional $80 million to fix it and replace all of that beautiful Italian marble with granite from South Carolina. This is where a lot of tour guides will say, and that's why you should never take your marble for granted. I don't like that joke, so I'm not going to tell you that joke. My takeaway is that that building cost $200 million. I have never made a mistake that has cost me $200 million, so I'm doing okay in my life. And honestly, I think that is the correct takeaway. So, our fourth tallest building there to remind us that we're not doing so bad. And then, if you look over to the right a little bit more, you'll see a building that looks like it's missing 2 floors. That is the St. Regis Hotel. That is our third tallest building in Chicago, but that is the tallest building in the world, built and designed by a woman. Jeannie Gang is the architect behind that beautiful masterpiece. It was built in 2020, and it is indeed missing 2 floors. And the reason for that is because, you know how we talked about the wind and the tallest building in Chicago and the Sears Tower? Well, wind is always a factor in any city, but specifically for Chicago. But essentially, all skyscrapers have to have a little bit of sway, otherwise they'll break in the wind. But you do have a formula for how much you can sway without people getting seasick in their multi-million-dollar penthouses at the very top. So, when they originally designed the building, they said, oh, we'll put mass dampers at the very top, which are essentially giant tanks of water, so when the wind pushes the building one way, the water sloshes the other way, and they cancel each other out. Very cool. I was like, oh, that's awesome. That's so cool. Well, it wasn't enough. About halfway through construction, they thought, oh no, the wind test, we're coming back, we need more something else. It's not going to work. It's going to like sway way too much. So they actually just took out 2 entire floors. The structure that you see sort of in the center there, those are the bays for the elevators. That's the only thing on those floors. There's barely any access other than for maintenance people to get up there. So they actually tore out 2 whole floors of penthouse. They're losing money on those floors being empty. However, Jeannie Gang was asked, hey, you want to put anything on the outside to, like, I don't know, make it seem like it wasn't a mistake? She was like, no, I would actually rather people look at my building, see that we make necessary sacrifices to the aesthetic in order for people to know they're safe, feel like they're safe, and engage with some architecture. It's pretty cool to know exactly how a building works just by looking at it. So, I really respect Jeannie Yang for that, and that building is very beautiful. You might have seen it on the way up. Don't worry, we're going to talk about it when we get back to the riverside, because there's a lot more going on that we can't see from out here. Now, if you drift your attention, we're kind of going to pass just in the right area to see it. The second tallest building in Chicago is the Trump International Hotel and Tower. It is going to be right at the mouth, basically right down the way of the river. What's so cool about that tower is that tower is designed by a man named Adrian Smith, who is a Chicago-born architect. We're super proud of Adrian Smith. If you look at that tower and you put another one right on top of it, that is the relative height to the other building that Adrian Smith is known for, the Burj Khalifa, the current tallest building in the world. So again, win for Chicago, am I right? All right, so the Trump International Hotel and Tower was actually built in 2009. It has so much concrete, which is how they were able to get those curved edges so well. So if you see a curve on a building, it's probably going to have some era of concrete to it. That way, because you can mold it to any way you'd like it. If it's kind of sturdy and kind of angular, it's most likely steel on the inside. Don't quote me on that. But what's so funny about this one here is that it is kind of hearkening to other buildings around it. What I love is that it's a contemporary building, which means it was built after the year 2000. And contemporary architecture doesn't really have like a thing yet. So when you talk about like Art Deco or modern architecture or postmodern, there are very specific details where you're like, oh, I see that, I can put that exactly where in my mind it was built. Contemporary doesn't really have one of those yet because we're still in the contemporary era. My idea of what it might be is chrome or mirrored glass, because you'll see a lot of contemporary buildings that have beautiful like just glass faces that are reflective. Trump has that, but because of the curved nature and because of how sort of simple it is, he's actually hearkening back to some modern architecture. And I'll explain that when we get closer, because the buildings, you see how it's kind of set at different levels. There's like 3 different bands that run across the middle. They're actually lined up with buildings around it, which is called a contextual architecture feature, which means it's talking with the elements surrounding it. I'm getting way into the terminology of it all. Don't worry, I'll refresh when we get to there. I'll be like, yeah, see, it's the same height as that building, which is why it's like that. And in any case, we're waiting for the lock to open, so I'm going to do my final little history lesson before it's like a point-and-shoot architecture game on the river. But essentially, none of this that you see here, this beautiful skyline, would not be possible if we hadn't had to go through one of the most iconic and most well-known tragic events of this city, which was the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. Now, if you are familiar with the legend goes, Mrs. O'Leary was out milking her cow late one night in the barn, and Daisy the cow got scared, knocked over a lantern, and set the entire city ablaze. That's the rumor. That's what was printed in the paper about a week after the fire. Now, it has come out